Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day today. In today's video, we are going to be covering the case of the Eriksson twins, and you guys, this case is straight up so bizarre, you're going to be shook. Like, I have not stopped thinking about this case since I first heard about it because it is that insane. And like, if it was a fictional book or a movie, I reckon I would get bored and turn it off or stop reading the book because it's just too insane to be believable. But it's all caught on camera, so it's real, and I'm so excited to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I want to pick your brains about this case because, I mean, you guys are going to see, it is so incredibly odd. Before we do get into it, I just quickly want to thank today's sponsor, Casetify, for making this video possible. I am so eternally grateful to have been working with one of my favorite brands for so long now, and for their support of my Mystery Monday series. You guys know how much I love Casetify. It is my ride all day. It is all I use on my phones. They're so cute. They have an endless supply of prints. Like, seriously, if you go on there, no matter what your vibe is, you are going to find a case you love, I can promise you, because there's just so much variety, and they're personalizable too. So you can get your initials, you can get a monogram, you can get your name, you can get a friend's name or monograms or initials and get it as a cute little gift for a friend or family member. They're approved for drops of up to 9.8 feet while still being wireless charging and 5G compatible, and they also have an antimicrobial coat which kills 99% of bacteria, and the impact and ultra impact cases are also made up from 65% recycled material, and the packaging that all of their products come in are 100% recycled as well, which is just amazing. It's not working. These are my favorite cases at the moment. I mean, I've got a bit of a theme going on here if you couldn't tell, but I'm currently just using the clear case with these like glittered edges, which I love. Gives it a little pizzazz. If you guys are interested in checking out any of the Casetify cases, you can go to casetify.com/Bella for a cheeky 15% off. I will leave the link in the description down below and all of the information there, so make sure you guys check that out. And speaking of cases, let's go ahead and get into today's case. So Sabina and Ursula Eriksson are twins, so they were both born on the 3rd of November in 1967 in Sweden, and they grew up in sunny and warm land in Sweden, of course, with an older sister named Mona and an older brother named Bjorn. And almost nothing is known about their upbringing. Pretty much the only thing we know is that in 2000, Ursula was living in the United States and Sabina was living in Ireland with her partner and 2 children. And then in 2008, when both twins were 40 years old, Ursula traveled to Ireland to visit Sabina, and they were basically inseparable during this trip. And then in the early hours of the 16th of May, without telling anyone, they caught a ferry from Ireland to Liverpool in England, and no one knows why they did this. They arrive in Liverpool at around 8:30 in the morning on the 17th of May, and they go straight to the St. Anne police station, where Sabina told the police that her partner was abusive and that she was scared for the safety of her children, which you may be thinking that is why they up and left in the middle of the night without telling anybody. But just keep listening, because so much other bizarre stuff goes on that truly you just don't really know. But the police from Liverpool contact the police back in Ireland, and they go... I get made fun of for the way I pronounce Ireland. I don't know why my R is so harsh. But they contact the police back in Ireland, and the Irish police go and they visit Sabina's partner and children, and he tells them, look, I have no idea what's going on. We had a bit of a fight last night, and then we woke up in the morning and they were gone and apparently went to England. And everything seemed to be fine. The children were fine. The partner was fine. So the Irish police called the English police, and they were like, look, if she's concerned, get her to contact us when she's back in Ireland. So Sabina and Ursula leave the police station, and at around 11:30 a.m. they board a National Express coach to London, which again, no one knows why or what they were going to London for, but they refused to put their bags in the baggage area. They were too big to really be holding in their arms, but they did anyway. They had the bags on their laps, and they were just acting really erratic, on the bus and they were clutching their bags, and so some people were concerned. The bus driver was concerned, and he ended up making an unscheduled stop at the Kiel service station at around 1 p.m, which generally they really do not make unscheduled stops. They have times, people have purchased tickets to go to certain stops. It's just not something that they regularly do. The twins were just acting so odd. So the driver pulls off at the Kiel service station. He goes back to the girls and he says, look, people are concerned. Can I please check your bags? And they absolutely refused to let him check their bags. So he kicked them off the bus. He said, you have to get off the bus. So the twins got off. They're at the service station by themselves, and there's CCTV footage at the service station, and they're like kind of around the back of the service station, if that makes sense. The manager of the service station sees them on CCTV, and she just thinks they're acting really weird, and she's concerned that they might have a bomb in their bag. So she contacts the police arrive, the police talk to Ursula and Sabina, and they're like, I don't think there's anything wrong. They seem to be acting totally normal, but they're gonna be on their way, so you don't have to worry about anything, to the manager of the service center. The police leave. Sabina and Ursula also leave the service station, and they are next seen at 3:20 p.m. on the M6 motorway on foot. They're walking in the median strip of the motorway on foot. This is a very busy motorway. There are 3 lanes either side. It's got a 70 mile per hour speed limit, which is like 112 kilometers an hour. So, you know, full motorway, obviously. And they are just walking in the middle of the motorway in the median strip. There's 2 barriers on either side, but it's still incredibly dangerous. And not to mention, I think it's illegal. I know in Australia, it is illegal to be walking on foot on the motorway, and I'm assuming it's the same in the UK. They also have CCTV that films the motorway, like behavioral cameras that are monitored by people, and so the people watching them see the twins walking on the M6 motorway, and they dispatch some highway patrol officers, which they're not police officers, they're just highway patrol officers. They're there to help in situations like these and help with traffic jams and that sort of thing. So they're dispatched out there, and while they are on their way in the car, on their way to just help these girls get off the highway, before they could even arrive, all of a sudden Sabina jumps over the barrier and onto the motorway, and she runs, like she hops directly into the fast lane of the motorway. So these people are probably traveling over 70 miles an hour, and she gets hit by a car. She gets knocked to the ground, but she gets straight back up like nothing happened, like she's not injured by being hit by a car in the fast lane of the motorway. And then she just makes her merry way over to the shoulder without being harmed again, without being hit by another car. And Ursula obviously follows her. She jumps over the barrier as well, and she heads over to the shoulder of the highway. And it's like she wasn't hit by a car. Like, she's standing up, she's fine, she's not in any pain, she has no injuries that anybody can see. Obviously though, a lot of people have witnessed her being hit by the car, so the police are called. It's also seen on CCTV footage, so the police are called, they're on their way, and they actually happen to be filming like one of those traffic cop shows, so they have a whole film TV crew with them. And when they arrive at the scene, the highway patrol officers have already arrived, and they're talking to Sabina and Ursula on the shoulder of the highway. And so one of the 2 highway patrol officers goes over to kind of brief the police on the situation and what's been happening, while Sabina and Ursula are talking to the other highway patrol officer. And this is being filmed by the BBC, filming the traffic cops show. And so you can see the police being briefed by the highway patrol officer, and you can see in the background Sabina and Ursula talking to the other highway patrol officer. And they're having just a regular conversation. They're just talking, they're acting very normal. It's very calm, it's fine. And then all of a sudden, Ursula bolts out onto the motorway, and the patrol officer she was talking to tries to grab her, but he only manages to grab her jumper, and her jumper like comes off her, and she bolts out onto the motorway, and she gets run over by a 40-ton 18-wheeler truck traveling at about 60 miles an hour.
Is she the one that speaks English or the other one?
Yes.
The other one, she's gonna run. Oh no! Mike Alpha, we need ambulance, senior officers to the scene, we've got 2 possible fatals.
And she doesn't just get hit by this truck, she gets dragged under the wheels of this truck. It drags her a while, and after it's done, you can see her body, you know, looking normal, and then it gets to her legs and they're like flat to the ground. They're totally crushed. Her shoes, you can see, have been like strewn into a different position on the motorway, and everyone is just like, oh my goodness, you know, it's shocking. And then just seconds later, Sabina does the same thing. She runs onto the motorway and she immediately gets hit by a Volkswagen car, and she goes onto the bonnet, hits the windscreen, and gets thrown up in the air by this car. And it was a pretty huge collision. Like, this car had so much damage to the bonnet of the car, the windshield was completely smashed, and there were dents on the roof of the car because obviously she had hit it at quite an impact and been flung up into the air, and then she just hit the road and she was unconscious for 15 minutes. But amazingly, she appeared to have no outwardly visible injuries. The police all rush onto the road, they stop the traffic, they rush to each of the girls to help them make sure that they're okay, and some of the officers go over to Ursula, who was hit by the truck, and amazingly as well, she is alive. She is fully awake and conscious, and she's being really aggressive towards the police. They're obviously trying to keep her calm because she has very severe injuries, but she is like spitting at them, she's clawing at them, she's calling them assholes, she's telling them to get away from her. She's being very, very aggressive.
Calm down.
Fucking asshole.
Calm down.
Jesus.
Mine's very aggressive, spitting at me. She is very badly injured. I don't know what's going on.
And I mean, I know that adrenaline can do crazy things to the body, and she would have so much adrenaline pumping through her after the incident, but to be hit by a 40-ton 18-wheeler traveling at 60 miles per hour and then to be fully conscious and like spitting and clawing and yelling at the police is insane to me. Sabina, on the other hand, she was unconscious for 15 minutes, and then when she regained consciousness, at first she was very calm, and the police were trying to keep her that way because while she has no outwardly visible injuries, she just got hit by a whole car traveling on a motorway and hit, you know, she was thrown up, she hit the ground. They don't know what kind of internal injuries that she might have, and they definitely don't want her to be moving or anything like that because they don't want the injuries to potentially get worse. But then Ursula yells over to her and says, "Be careful, they're going to take your organs." As soon as Ursula says that, Sabina just switches. She immediately starts getting really irritated. She starts trying to get up. The police are obviously trying to keep her calm. And it's like she didn't get hit by a car because she just rises. She gets up from the ground and starts making a run for the other side of the motorway. And the police are obviously trying to prevent her from doing that. They're trying to grab her and restrain her. And she turns around and she punches this cop square in the face, knocking the cop to the ground, which gives her the opportunity to jump the barrier and run onto the other side of the motorway. And luckily, by some miracle, she is not hit by another car. You know, they probably see what's going on the other side of the road. They saw her coming, and so thankfully they slowed down and she wasn't hit by a third car. It's nuts, right? And then the police obviously are jumping over the barrier as well, going to the other side of the motorway, stopping traffic and trying to grab Sabina and restrain her again, obviously. But she like takes her jacket off and starts, you know, jumping around like this, like she is ready to fight these police officers. And mind you, she has just been hit by 2 cars on the motorway, was knocked unconscious for 15 minutes by one of these collisions and totally messed up the car she hit. And now she's here jumping around ready to fight the police. And not just that, but the police could not restrain her. One of the officers actually said it seemed like she had inhuman strength. The cars on the motorway start stopping and civilians start getting out to try and help the police restrain her, and it takes 6 people to finally restrain her. And even when they have her restrained, you know, they handcuff her, of course, and she is still really trying to fight them. She's yelling at them, she's being very aggressive, and she's saying, call the police, I need the police. And the police are like, we are the police, honey.
The police!
We are the police!
We are the
No, let go!
Hey!
I'll get that.
Roll her forwards.
Go on.
Oh, that...
Run her over her.
Fuck you guys! Fuck you! Fuck off!
Eventually, the paramedics arrive, and despite the fact that she is handcuffed and has 6 people restraining her, she's still too agitated and fighting back too hard. They can't actually help her or try to treat her or check her for injuries, so they actually have to sedate her.
You're going to carry her to me off? Yeah.
Help me!
She got up off.
Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, back on the other side of the motorway, an air helicopter comes to airlift Sabina to the hospital because obviously her injuries are extremely severe, and she ends up staying in the hospital until September. And this is all caught on camera as well, and you can see in the footage that the police go up to the paramedics and they say to them, the issue is she is just so high that she's not showing any signs of injury, she's not showing any signs of pain, because they obviously think at this point that the girls are just on so many drugs. That's why they're not affected by being hit by 2 cars or having a truck run over her and completely crush her legs, and then acting like they don't feel anything and there are no effects from it. So I think the assumption that they were just on a bunch of drugs is fair, and they're also thinking that they may potentially also have taken a suicide pact together. After they were taken away to the hospital, the police searched their bags because their bags were still there on the side of the road, and these were the bags that they were like clutching to them, and they really didn't find anything that incriminating. They found like a bunch of mobile phones, which was weird, and then they found some identification for one of the twins, but no identification for the other twin. So in the hospital, Ursula obviously had extremely severe injuries, and she actually had to stay in the hospital until September, like I said. And because she had such severe injuries, they did have to take a blood test, and this blood test came back saying that she had no alcohol, no drugs whatsoever in her system. Sabina only suffered minor injuries, and she was actually released after just 5 hours. So they actually didn't even do a blood test on her, but they assumed because her sister's blood test came back clean that she was also clean and had no alcohol or drugs in her system. And they actually didn't even do a full psychiatric evaluation of her either, which you would think, after running onto the road multiple times, being hit by multiple cars, you know, just the way that she acted towards police, that they would do some kind of psychiatric evaluation, but they didn't. She was briefly seen by a police doctor who determined that she was fine. There was nothing wrong with her mental state and she was free to go. Obviously, when she was released, she was taken immediately into police custody, and it was just so crazy because she was like a completely different person. They didn't even need to handcuff her to get her into the back of the police car. She was just really calm. She was like joking, flirting, laughing with the police. Like, it was like she was a totally different person. And not once and the whole time she was with police, she stayed overnight, you know, they questioned her, processed her, charged her, and not once did she ask about her sister. At one point, she did say something kind of unsettling while she was with the police. She says, in Sweden, we say that accidents rarely come alone. Usually it's followed by 1 more, maybe 2. Police, obviously, when they're processing her, are also asking a bunch of questions, and at one point they ask her, like, have you ever harmed yourself? Which she replies no. After she ran in front of 2 cars, I think that would be considered hurting yourself, but she says no, she's never tried to harm herself. But Sabina spent the night in police custody, and she was processed and charged the next day with trespassing illegally on the highway and assaulting a police officer, and she received a sentence of 1 day in prison. And because she had already spent the night in prison, that means she had already served her sentence and she was free to go out into the world. Like, none of that happened. Not to mention, you know, the police didn't really help her out here. Like, after she clearly had some sort of episode the day before, they really did not help her try to find a place to go, figure out what her next steps were. They just released her into a city called Stoke-on-Trent that she knew nothing about. She had never been there. She didn't know the area at all. And they're like, you know, good luck. They gave her a clear bag with her stuff in it, which had a $1,500 laptop and $1,300 in cash in a clear plastic bag. You know, like, anyone could have seen it. She's in an unusual place. And so she's just kind of standing on the sidewalk looking like a lost puppy. She has no idea where to go. She doesn't know what to do. Then at around 7 p.m, 54-year-old Glenn Hollinshead and his friend Peter Malloy, they were having a few drinks at the bar and they were walking home with Glenn's dog, and they saw her standing on the sidewalk and they thought, she looks really out of place. She's kind of sticking out like a sore thumb and she looks like just very confused and lost. And then she actually calls out to them and she says, "That's a nice dog you've got there." And so they cross the road, they go over to talk to her and they're like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, you look a little lost." And she tells them, "I'm looking for a bed and breakfast, I need somewhere to stay tonight, and I'm trying to find my sister as well. My sister Ursula, she's in hospital, but I have no idea what hospital, I don't know what's going on with her." And so Glenn tells her, "Look, there's really no bed and breakfasts around this area, so, you know, feel free to come back with us to my place. My brother also works at the hospital, so I can call him up and try and help locate your sister for you," because Glenn was known to be this really nice guy. He always wanted to help people out. He was a good Samaritan. He was very friendly. If ever there was someone that needed something, he was always going to be that person that would give it to them or would help them out in whatever way he could. So Sabina accepted. They all go back to Glenn's place and she became a lot more warm and friendly and more open with them. And when they got back to his place, they had a couple of drinks together and they were just kind of having friendly conversation. But as the night went on, Sabina started acting very strange. She refused to talk about her sister. Like, obviously she had brought up that she wanted to find her sister, so whenever Glenn or Peter would ask her about her sister, she would either make it like a really awkward silence or she would just completely change the subject. There were also times where she would just kind of get up out of her seat, she would walk over to the window, open the blinds and like look around like she's looking for something, and then she would snap them back and stand back and go to sit down again. So she was acting really paranoid too. And there was another incident where she offered both men a cigarette out of a packet of cigarettes that she had been smoking all night. And once the men got the cigarettes in their mouth, before they even lit them, she just snatches them out of their mouth and says, "What are you doing? They could be poisoned." But she has been smoking the cigarettes from that exact packet all night. Peter just found the whole thing very odd. He found Sabina very suspicious because, you know, when she would kind of snap the blinds shut and go and sit down again, it seemed like she was trying to hide, and he was just thinking, what is she hiding from? Something is just not right here. And he kind of voiced his concerns to Glenn, and Glenn was like, "You know, it's okay. I'm just gonna let her stay. She's obviously in need of some help." And at around midnight, Peter was like, "Okay, you know, I'm gonna go home." And he left Glenn and Sabina at Glenn's house. The next day at around 7:40 p.m, Glenn is making himself and Ursula some dinner. He's gonna make them some tea. He's also called his brother at the hospital to try and see if he can get any information about Sabina's sister Ursula. And he realizes he's out of tea bags. So he goes outside to ask his neighbor if he can have some of his tea bags. And his neighbor's in his driveway just kind of washing his car. His name is Frank Booth. And he says, "You know, I'm just gonna finish washing my car and then I'll just go and grab some tea bags and drop them off to you." And Glenn is like, "Okay, that sounds great." And he goes back inside his house, and not even a minute later, he comes stumbling out the front of his house. He's clutching his stomach. He's bleeding profusely, and he says, "I've been stabbed. She stabbed me." And Frank immediately runs over to him. He calls 911, and the last thing that Glenn says to him is, "Please look after my dog," which I have no words. That is so incredibly heartbreaking. He had been stabbed 5 times. One of those times he had actually been stabbed in the heart, and he passed away before the paramedics could even arrive. And I think what's even sadder about this whole situation is that later on in 2012, somebody anonymously released some footage from the incident on the M6 where both twins ran out onto the highway. And this footage was conveniently cut from the traffic cops episode. And you can hear the police say that they're thinking about charging the girls with a 136 clause under the Mental Health Act, which basically allows them to detain a person and give them a full psychiatric evaluation. And for whatever reason, they decided not to go ahead and do that, which is really sad because obviously these women were going through something at the time. And if they had detained them on this 136 clause and done a psychiatric evaluation, Sabina wouldn't have been out on the streets. She wouldn't have been able to murder somebody because she wouldn't have been on the street. She would have still been in custody.
Well, 136 if she is.
Well, she needs to be, for if nothing else, for going on the carriageway and for her own safety.
Unfortunately, for whatever reason, this didn't happen. And they cut that scene from traffic cops because obviously they didn't end up going ahead with it. And Glenn passed away. And meanwhile, while they were waiting for the paramedics, Sabina fled the house. She ran away, she sprinted, and at one point she stopped and she sat down on the side of the road, and she actually had a hammer with her, and her hair was matted with blood because she was just smashing this hammer into her head over and over and over again. And she was actually spotted by a motor vehicleist named Joshua Gradich. He pulled his car over because he could see her smashing her head with the hammer, and he could see that her hair was matted with blood. So he pulls his car over, he goes over to her, and he tries to wrestle the hammer out of her hand and get her to stop doing that. And she, pulls out of her back pocket a broken roof tile. Who knows where she got it at this point, but she grabs it out of her pocket and she smashes him on the head with him, which gives her the opportunity to get up again and flee, and she runs away. And next thing Joshua knows, he sees 2 paramedics, going after her, and she's on foot. But somehow the paramedics don't catch up to her until she reaches a bridge. This bridge was at Heron Cross, and it traveled over the A50 highway. And I feel like you can probably imagine where this is going, but she climbs over the railing of the bridge and she jumps onto the highway below, which is like a 30-foot or 10-meter drop, and she broke both of her ankles and fractured her skull, but she was still alive. At this point, she has now been hit by 2 cars on the motorway. She was seen smashing her head in with a hammer to the point where it was just blood matting her hair. And now she's jumped off a bridge, which was a 10-meter, 30-foot drop onto a busy highway, and she is still alive. Obviously, the paramedics take her to the hospital where she's treated, and she's released on the 11th of September. And as soon as she is discharged from the hospital, she is charged with Glenn's murder. Ursula was also discharged from the hospital in September, but she faced no charges, and she went to Sweden for a little bit after she was released before returning to the US. And she is apparently now a member of the Sacred Heart Church in Bellevue in Washington, and nothing else is known about her. No one knows anything about these women before the incident or after the incident. So back to Sabina. After she was released from the hospital on the 11th of September, she was charged with the murder of 54-year-old Glenn Hollinshead, and she was questioned by the police, but she refused to answer any question. Every single question the police asked her, she would respond with no comment. So still to this day, we have no idea what happened between when Peter left Glenn's house and when Sabina stabbed and killed Glenn, and we have no idea why she did it. Her trial was due to begin in February 2009, but was pushed back until the 1st of September because they actually had a lot of issues trying to obtain her medical records for Sweden, but turns out the case never went to trial anyway. She originally pled not guilty to the murder charge, but eventually changed her plea to guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility because she had had 2 forensic psychiatrists evaluate her, one for the defense and one for the prosecution, and they both deemed that she was mentally unstable at the time of Glenn's murder. The prosecution believes she was suffering from acute polymorphic syndrome, which is an acute but transient disorder with the onset of psychotic symptoms like delusions or hallucinations. The defense, though, actually believed that she was a secondary sufferer of folie à deux, which if you guys have seen my video on the Trump family, you probably already know what folie à deux is. And if you haven't seen that video, I will link it down below if you're interested in checking that out. But folie à deux is very rare and it translates to madness of two, and it's basically shared psychosis or a shared delusional disorder where delusional beliefs and sometimes hallucinations are transferred from one person to another person, generally someone who is very close, like family and oftentimes twins. So like Ursula runs onto the motorway and gets hit by a truck, and then Sabina follows and does the exact same thing, which I think makes more sense than acute polymorphic syndrome. I mean, I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist, but you know, they were both acting very bizarrely and both kind of doing the same thing. Either way, both psychiatrists actually deemed that she was mentally unstable at the time of the murder, but that she wasn't anymore. She was fine now, which means that she couldn't actually be sentenced to, you know, spend time in a mental facility until she was deemed fit because she was already deemed fit. So she was only sentenced to 5 years in prison, and she only served 2.5 years before being released in 2011. And just like with Ursula, pretty much nothing is known about what happened to her after she was released. We really do not know anything about these women from before or after these incidents. After Ursula was released from hospital and Sabina was released from prison, they just disappear again. So let's quickly talk about some theories, shall we? The first theory is that they were fleeing from Sabina's abusive partner. Obviously, as soon as they got to Liverpool, the first thing they did was go to the police, report that Sabina's partner was abusive and that she was concerned for the safety of her children. But as I mentioned, the police did go and question the partner. Everything was fine, and he told them, we got into a fight last night, and then next thing I know, in the middle of the night, her and her sister just up and disappear and go to Liverpool. And a lot of people have mentioned the fact that, you know, she says she was concerned for her children's safety, but she didn't bring the children with her when she fled, which I think kind of adds to the theory a little bit. I think this definitely could have been what fueled the folie à deux, that maybe her and her partner did get into a fight and Ursula was like, this is not okay. He is abusive, your children are in danger, and we need to go. And they just kind of bounced off each other until eventually they got up in the middle of the night and fled to Liverpool. I mean, potentially the fact that he was truly abusive is also what fueled the folie à deux, and the women just kind of kept bouncing off each other until they were like, we need to get out of here, and they fled. The only thing I don't know that this explains is just them jumping in front of cars multiple times, jumping off bridges, hitting herself in the head with a hammer. I mean, I think this is the most likely theory for obvious reasons, but I just don't know kind of where the jump was from fleeing to jumping in front of multiple cars, hitting your head with a hammer, and jumping off a bridge. The next theory is that their organs were being harvested because obviously after Ursula had been run over by a truck and Sabina had been hit by 2 cars and the police were trying to calm them both down, Ursula yelled over to her sister and said, they're gonna take your organs. Their older brother Bjorn actually also came out and said that the twins had been running from maniacs. This has never been confirmed, so no idea if it's true. No other information was given, but it definitely adds to this theory. I mean, there definitely is a huge demand for organ trafficking and organ harvesting. There's a huge market for it. Actually, according to the Washington Post, 10% of all organ transplants annually are actually done through organ trafficking, which is about 10,000 illegal organ transplants a year. It's a huge business. The next theory is that the twins were drug smugglers, and the reason for this theory is just the way that they were kind of acting with their bags on the coach and at the service station, how they were like clutching them and just acting really weird, and they actually got kicked off the bus because they refused to let the bus driver look inside their bags. And obviously after the incident where they were both hit by the cars, their bags were searched and there were multiple phones found in their bags, which is obviously weird. And they were acting like they were on drugs because, you know, they were just acting so erratically and like they weren't feeling any pain from all of the being hit by cars thing. But in saying that, their bags were searched and no drugs were found. No drugs were found in their system when the blood tests were done either. And I mean, you'd think that if they like shelved them or something, that they would have found them while they were in the hospital. So I don't think that's a thing either. I also watched an episode of Grey's Anatomy where, like, you know, the smugglers swallowed like a little baggie of drugs and that bag kind of split open, so then the drugs went all through their system, and that was like another theory. But again, a blood test was done and no drugs were found in their system. Not to mention, imagine if that happened to both of them. Like both the drug bags inside both of them split open. What a coincidence that would be. But yeah, truly, I don't really think there's too much weight to this theory just because there were no drugs in their system and there were no drugs found in their bags. So like, how could they be smuggling drugs? Now, the last theory I think is the most interesting theory. I don't really think it's that plausible, but it's definitely interesting to talk about. And that theory is that Sabina and Ursula were created by MK Ultra, which is basically an illegal human experimentation program that was carried out by the CIA. During these experiments, they would carry out numerous methods to manipulate subjects' mental states and brain functions, such as high doses of psychoactive drugs, electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, torture, and also verbal and sexual abuse. So people thought they may have been like trying to create super soldiers or something, and so this is why Sabina and Ursula were behaving erratically and why they were so strong and just like not feeling any pain. I mean, Ursula was spitting and clawing and yelling and swearing at officers who were just trying to help her after she got hit by a 40-ton 18-wheeler truck traveling at 60 miles an hour, and she was showing no signs of pain whatsoever. And Sabina was hit by not one, but two cars, the first of which was traveling in the fast lane, so probably traveling at more than 70 miles an hour. The second one, again on the motorway, and she was flung into the air and was knocked unconscious for 15 minutes. But then she just got up, punched an officer square in the face, and ran over to the other side of the road, having to be restrained by 6 people. And if you remember, one of the officers described her as having inhuman strength. And despite that, she was released from the hospital after 5 hours, had no injuries, went and stabbed a man to death before smashing herself in the head with a hammer repeatedly, drawing blood, and then jumping off a bridge. I mean, one could argue that she was trying to do this to feel something. Like if she was one of these super soldiers and couldn't feel any pain, she could have been just trying to do whatever she could to feel some sort of pain. And another thing that ties into this theory is that there is no information about either one of the twins before or after this incident. No one knows about their upbringing. No one knows where they went or what they did afterwards, which you would think, you know, in cases like this that are huge and bizarre, friends, family, co-workers, acquaintances come out and talk about these people. Usually they're like, you know, she was a really nice girl, I don't know what happened, or not even the people from the bus came out to speak and say, yeah, they were acting really weird on the bus. No one came forward to speak about these girls, which is just so unusual in a case like this. And not to mention, if you guys remember, I mentioned at the trial it had to be pushed back because they had so much difficulty obtaining her medical records for Sweden, and then the case never ended up going to trial anyway. And despite the fact that she was deemed mentally unstable at the time of the murder, she wasn't deemed mentally unstable anymore. So she didn't have to go into a mental institution, nothing like that. She was free to go and disappear again. And where did she go? We don't know. I mean, I think this theory is really far-fetched. I don't really think it's a thing. And not to mention, MK Ultra stopped doing their thing in like the late 1980s. I mean, as far as we know, But I definitely wanted to talk about the theory because it's very interesting and I really want to talk about your thoughts on this whole case. Please tell me all of your thoughts and feelings because this case is insane. It's nuts. It is the most nuts case I've ever done. And it just keeps going and going and going. Like you think it's done and then she does something else. So please, let's discuss. Tell me everything you're thinking right now about this case. Any more theories? What theories you believe? Let me know it all. Lay it out in the comments because what the heck. But that's it for me today, guys. That's everything. Can't wait to discuss. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.